Fred Mensing do it.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and time for the February 1st, 2011 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. Is Reverend Ponce in the audience?
No.
Reverend, we didn't see you. Come on down, please. Reverend Ponce is going to give us the opening prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner O'Brien. Good morning.
Good morning. Let us pray. Father God, I thank you for the opportunity to live, work, and raise our families in Indian River County. I thank you for our leaders for their service and their sacrifice. I pray a blessing over the residents and the families of Indian River County, and I pray for a spirit of wisdom and discernment to be upon all of our leaders as they seek for the best of the residents and families and the workers of this great county, Lord. I pray for blessing and favor over all who reside here. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Ponce. Under additions and deletions to the agenda, emergency items, we have one deletion, item 10B2, which is under public speaking. Mr. Ardor Rigby has pulled his request to speak today. Are there any other additions or deletions to today's agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Passes 5-0. Thank you. We've got today a proclamation from our golf director, Mr. Komaritz. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. What we have is we've been recognized by the governing bodies of throughout the country that we are Audubon certified, and which that means is that we do things very sensitive to the environment. You know, a lot of people think that a golf course is maintained, just mow the greens and water the fairways and throw a little fertilizer down, but we are very sensitive to the way we practice out there, and by doing that, we attain the certification that we have, and we're proud of it, and it's it's a move in the right direction because there's so many things that are happening to take away from the environment, and we're trying to maintain the environment. And one thing in addition that we do is we do utilize thousands of yards of debris mulch from the landfill as ground cover for the golf course. So it's also a good environmental impact where we're able to use that kind of ground cover and reduce the use of herbicides. So it's another win-win for the county. So anyway, we're proud of this type of recognition. It puts us a little bit above the norm.
Bob, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there any one of those practices that you have out there that might be able to be used by a residential homeowner?
Oh, absolutely. In watering, for example, everyone knows that they're supposed to water at just limited times of the week, and they need to be doing that because the golf course itself utilizes very, very little groundwater. Only time we're ever able to use groundwater is when extreme drought conditions, and we haven't used groundwater in almost 500 days. We use surface water and only waters from the canals and from the rain, so in our lakes. So we use no groundwater whatsoever. So the homeowners should be recognized that we're on our limits, so we need to practice that.
Bob, thank you very much. Anything else you'd like to say about the Audubon? Anybody else?
If I could, yes. Just the one thing that I do not hear any complaints about is our golf course. In fact, and typically, believe me, if anything goes wrong, we hear about it. I hear nothing but good as far as the quality, and of course they always follow it up by saying, especially for it being a public course, and it is. I don't golf, but those that do really enjoy it and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we're extremely proud of the condition this year. We've had a difficult winter so far, but we've been able to maintain our level out there, and I think the customers are very satisfied.
This is great, Bob. I'm very proud of what you've done out there. Of course, this comes at a great cost. All the palmettos you preserved out there and all the lakes out there sure eat up a lot of my golf balls when I play out there. So it's a terrible price, but it's well worth it.
Gotta do it.
Commissioner, I'm glad you play out there. I'll say that I do help your golf course and the condition of your golf course by not playing. Exactly. And I'll make sure that I do that.
Commissioner O'Brien, that's called user error.
That big basket of used golf balls for sale, those are all mine.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm just glad that the Audubon recognizes this is good for your birdies and eagles. I told you I shouldn't say.
Well, having hopefully hit the low point for the day.
It's only get better.
And just real quick, just for those that may or may not be aware, with Peter mentioning some costs, that if you do not golf, this does not cost the taxpayers. This is an enterprise fund. Whatever y'all raise is what y'all used on the course. So if you don't golf, don't say, well, how can we afford to golf whenever we're laying off and having to go through what we have to go through. Just let everybody know this is an enterprise fund, and you don't pay for it unless you use it.
Absolutely, and we're very sensitive to the fact that there are people that have to work for a living, and there's retirees in the community, and we're sensitive to the fact that we need to keep our rates at a minimum at all costs.
I would like to, also, that I think Dick Bird was a driving force in this occurring. And I'm very pleased, and Dick did what he was supposed to do and what he did do out of the love of the county, and not to see this be called the Dick Bird Public Golf Course.
Mr. Chairman, just follow Commissioner Davis said, last week we had our sports commission do a tour, and we stopped at the golf course. And Bob, why don't you, because like Commissioner Davis said, this is enterprise, but tell us a little bit about all the tournaments you guys bring in and how many people come to play in those tournaments you sponsor, and how the whole community benefits from the economic input that the tournaments you guys host.
What we try to do is we try to use the Sandridge housing for the Treasure Coast Golf Association, which we stage the Treasure Coast Amateur in the fall. We have what we call the Dick Bird two-man team championship in the fall. We have our seniors championship. And along those lines, we're doing so many things for kids. We're continually doing things to bring our young people into the game and to bring them along in the game, because, golf is at a weak point. It's not at a strong point. It's at a weak point. So whatever we can do to try to create more activity, we need to continue to do that. But yes, we're doing so many. We do try to do a lot of golf tournaments. We feel it's a facility available to do those things. So we want to allow those competitive players to have the opportunity. But by this, we do bring a lot of additional players to the community. Yes.
Yeah, one last thing, too. I just want to say thanks to Bob. He's been there a long time, and the golf course is what it is a lot because of Bob, the effort he puts in, and his foresight in making that work up there. He's done a great job for years.
Well, thank you. I'm kind of a fixture out there. For 25 years, I'm kind of a fixture.
Commissioner Fletcher?
And that's the point I was going to bring out, Bob. You mentioned that golf was at a weak point, a lull, and maybe that's true for some of the higher price locations to golf. I don't golf, but I have visited the location. It is pristine, or as near pristine as you can make it. I understand that in the past 6 months you've had 2 banner Saturdays, that attendance was at an all-time high.
We've had great weekend play, which is kind of unusual, where weekends are a slower time. But yes, we've had some great weekend play, and again, we hope and we see that golf is at a height this season. So as long as you provide me or us with good weather, we'll be able to continue our height and play.
Well, the weather is out of our control, but we'll do what we can for you. Oh, I didn't know you had that kind of connection.
There you go.
Bob, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, make it rain.
We're going to skip the weather report now and move on to the approval of the minutes. Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the regular minutes of November 16, 2010, and December 7, 2010.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Davis. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. We've got some informational items, and we'll now move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to pull item C, Charlie,
We're going to pull, if it's okay, items C,
D, Delta,
D, and
E, Echo.
and E. Fine. Pulled by Commissioner Fletcher.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item H.
And item H.
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
We've got a motion to approve as amended from Commissioner Davis. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving to item 8C.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, pull the item for discussion.
Commissioner Fletcher?
We have the current committee application for the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'd like to make a nomination to appoint a businessman from the north end of the community, and that would be Todd Brugnano.
Okay, we have a nomination for Mr. Brugnano.
Second that.
We have a second. Are there any other nominations? Commissioner O'Brien.
Or that was Commissioner Wheeler.
I'm sorry, Commissioner
I'd like to
Wheeler.
nominate Bob Bruce, who's a past member, did an outstanding job, was always well-informed of his homework, and has a scientific background and just great depth of understanding of the county. Been here a long time, and he's my nomination for P&Z.
We've got a nomination from Commissioner Wheeler. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. And just to follow up, I think one of the important things is this seat was opened up when Dr. Cox resigned, and I think Dr. Cox is known as representing a lot of the environmental interest for the community. And I think over the last several years, the composition of the P&Z board had been very balanced. We had some business folks on there, we had some environmental folks, and so I think we had a very good balance. I think all aspects of the community are covered, and I think Mr. Bruce kind of helps fill that environmental side of the community and would maintain that balance. And again, I think the P&Z, we tasked them to do the mining ordinances, and there's a lot of discussion on that, and I thought they did a wonderful job bringing that to us. And so I think just, Mr. Brugnano obviously is a good businessman. I think we do have business interests represented on P&Z, and I'd like to fill the Dr. Cox's environmental spot with someone more on the environmental side. I think Mr. Bruce fulfills that mission.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
I didn't know it was an environmental spot. I thought it was an at-large spot.
It
is at large, but
You're
Dr.
just
Cox
expressing his opinion. I
had
think
an environmental background.
Okay. I just want to clarify it.
Commissioner Davis.
Just real quick, I appreciate some of the thoughts that Commissioner O'Brien brought out, and I agree with you as far as complimenting our P&Z and what they've went through with the regulations for the mining ordinances and everything. And in going through and looking at the composition of the current board, I believe that Mr. Tripson does a phenomenal job also, and we have some of that representation and that you are mentioning earlier. And more importantly, I think that the balance is important. And whenever I look at who's on there, I believe that the environmental side of things is being very well represented with Mr. Jens Tripson. So,
I agree.
That's it. Kind of went into why I'm making the decision that I'm making on this one. Same logic.
Okay, any other nominations? There being none, nomination are closed.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to hear if there's any of the applicants here that would wish to speak?
We can do that. I don't know if it's normal.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready for the question.
Okay, we call the question. All in favor for Mr. Brugnano?
Aye.
That's 3. So Mr. Brugnano has the appointment to the P&Z. I'd like to thank all the applicants,
Yes.
Mr. Brugnano, Mr. Bruce, Ms. Metcalf, and Mr. Raines, for putting your applications. These committees only work because a lot of citizens give their time and efforts to the committees, and the P&Z being a particularly important committee. So I'll take this opportunity to thank everybody who serves on the P&Z for their work, and every applicant today for giving us a choice in this. And it was a clear choice in that we had two sides and it was a close vote. So thank you, everybody. Moving on to pulled item 8D. This is current committee applications for the Tourist Development Council.
Move Keith Kite.
I second that.
We have a motion and second for Keith Kite. Are there any other nominations?
Mr. Chair, if I could add some information to this, please.
Please.
This is a position opened up for an owner-operator of tourist accommodations, and Ms. Catherine Beatty Self, who had served for many years on the TDC, recently submitted her resignation, and that left this one position open. We have 2 qualified candidates. The other thing with TDC is Mr. John Bates, who had served for quite a few years, has been unable to attend any of the meetings over the last year or two. And I had a discussion with Mr. Bates, and he indicated that he thought that, given his schedule and things, that he would not be opposed to stepping down and having some new blood come in. So we have sent a letter to Mr. Bates just requesting he formalize that with a letter of resignation. We have not received it yet, but I do anticipate that second tourist operator position to be open. And at this point, given that, I would also like to nominate Jennifer Bates for that second position.
I'd second that.
Any discussion on that?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think that we have two very qualified
Yes.
candidates, and this is a difficult one. I'm going to go with Mr. Kite on this. He is the owner, one of the
But
principals.
that's on the nomination. I mean, any problem with doing them both at the present time?
Not me. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, to save time and the taxpayers' dollars, we'll do them both today. We'll begin with the nomination for the position which is now open. I just want to make that clear. This is for the position which is now open, and we have one nomination for that, Mr. Kite. So he basically gets it. We'll now have the position that should be coming open shortly, and that is for Jennifer Bates for the Tourist Development Council. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So I'm not sure if I actually asked if it was all in favor for Mr. Kite, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. All in favor for Mr. Kite?
Aye.
So both pass for 5-0, but Mr. Kite is taking the presently open seat.
That was almost like a T-ball game where nobody really lost.
Yes, it was wonderful. Let's see if we can do as well with the next one.
Well, I don't know. There's quite a
Probably
few
not.
more applicants.
The next one is 8E, current committee applications for the Economic Development Council, and there are a number of applicants. I'll accept any
Mr. Chairman?
nominations. Mr.
I'd like
O'Brien.
to nominate Mr. Carl Zimmerman.
I'll second.
Second.
Mr. Zimmerman is a local businessman. Obviously, he's a former elected official. He's been serving on the Chamber's, the EDD, the Economic Development Division, which is the private side of economic development here in the county. He's been very active in that, a very integral part of that, and I think he would be in an excellent position to step in and fill the at-large position on the EDC.
Wonderful. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Davis. Are there any other nominations?
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like we have a second and a third already. I just want to echo what Commissioner Davis said about one of the previous one. We have well-qualified individuals, and I truly appreciate several of the individuals stepping forward, but I'll fully support the nomination.
Given that, all in favor of Mr. Zimmerman?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And again, I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Fletcher's words. I'd like to thank all 6 of the applicants, Mr. Holmes, Mr. Monticello, Mr. Raines, Rigby's, Weiss, and Zimmerman. Again, without your support, these committees would not be able to function properly.
I'd
Thank
like to
you.
welcome Commissioner O'Brien and Commissioner Wheeler to making the right decision on one of these here.
Even blind pigs find acorns once in a while. So,
One out of 3 ain't bad.
moving on to item
That's what I call his recognition.
This was pulled by Commissioner O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the bid award for the installing the field lights at Vero Beach Sports Village. Part of the staff recommendation is that in addition to the cost of the lights, there's a $36,670 electric utility impact fee to the city of Vero Beach. I have asked 2 city council members to bring that up on their meeting today for the city to consider to cover that impact fee cost, to show, they are 10% owners of the facility, and I think them stepping up and covering that impact fee would show they're partnering with us and moving forward as partners on that. So I'd like to go ahead and move approval of the bid, but hold off on approving the payment of the impact fee till we see if the city is willing to cost share that with us.
Second that.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Wheeler. Any other discussion? I think that's a great idea, Commissioner O'Brien, and certainly will support it. There being no other discussion, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, and Chris, thank you for standing by. That takes care of the consent agenda. Move on to public discussion items. We have a request to speak from Fred Menzing regarding 3 issues. Mr. Menzing, good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Fred Mensing, 7580 129th Street, Sebastian, Florida. The first item concerns the hiring practices of Indian River County. For the public's information, 12 persons that worked in the department which operated the trash transfer stations were found not qualified by Republic, who's got the contract to run them now, in order to do the job. The taxpayers have been ripped off one way or another because somebody doesn't know how to hire and manage help. If this help is that bad, I do not know the numbers specifically. Some fail for medical reasons, some fail for background checks, some fail for drugs. This is not the kind of help that the citizen deserves from the government, and something should be done to correct it. The $400,000 you're saving might have been saved if you had staff that was competent to do the job. Obviously, the public doesn't think you did. The second item is a request that you will close the property from 129th Street to 130th Street to the public. This matter is possibly headed into the federal court system. We're already in the federal court system with a bankruptcy action. I wish to advise you before we start, and you might want to take and have Mr. Plakowitz bring 13C to the floor now while I'm here. You have all received correspondence. Mr. Plakowitz apparently never advised you that he was advised of this on the 3rd of January by fax. I know from one commissioner until he heard of it from me and discovered that my correspondence with Mr. Plakowitz existed. And for this reason alone, I think Mr. Plakowitz should be removed from any of this. Plus, he will be a defendant if we go to court. You have until the end of your meeting to appoint, and I've suggested at the last meeting that Mr. DeBraw or Mr. Zudo be the ones to deal with. I cannot trust Mr. Plakowitz based on his prior actions. I actually would recommend his firing. If not, you are all on notice. Tomorrow the appointments will be made, the paperwork will be filed, and I can assure you the U.S. trustee, if he sees any money in his pockets, is not going to authorize the dropping of the case. If you have any questions, you can ask them now.
I don't have any particular questions, but I just, Mr. Plakowitz, do you want to move yours up to now, or what would you like to do? What would you prefer on that?
Well, keep in mind that, keep in mind that my item was simply a placeholder on the agenda to give the board or any member of the board who wanted to discuss the issue a place on the agenda to do so.
Okay.
So I really didn't have anything to add on my item. I had said in my memo that I really do not recommend taking any action right now. But again, if any commissioner wants to raise the issue and talk about it, I wanted to make sure you had a place on the agenda to do so.
Well, my feeling on this is basically we've been threatened with a lawsuit multiple times, and I don't believe that the proper discussion of a lawsuit between an attorney and his client and where the clients is from a dais at a public place. So I'm very happy to let the courts take the item if it's presented to them and let justice prevail in the court system.
That's the opinion of all of you?
Unless there's some other way of making this go away without it costing us more money and time into the courts, but I don't know that there is.
Mr. Chairman, I'm confident and satisfied that Mr. Plakowitz will handle this in our best interest, and we'll leave it to the county attorney to make these decisions.
And I'll just add one thing. It may be unfortunate that Mr. Mensing does not trust Mr. Plakowitz, but Mr. Plakowitz has been with us roughly since March, and I've certainly been very pleased with the job he's done, and he has certainly earned my trust as the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners. He has that today. He has not done anything to question that in the least bit, so I'm happy to go forward with his advice on this subject.
Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask Mr. Plakowitz, counsel, have we taken a deep look into the legal right of the properties that have been challenged and discussed by Mr. Mensing as far as ownership dating back to the 1800s? Are we certain of the survey, the validity, and has it been contested to this date?
The ownership, the existence of those so-called strips, the surveying of all of that has been an issue that has been discussed. I don't know how many lawsuits have been filed in the past. Yes. I don't know how many Mr. Mensing has filed in the past. Mr. Mensing has filed 2 lawsuits against us in the past 7 months on those issues, but he files them and then he does nothing with them. So I would have to say that that whole world is still unclear. No court has resolved it. I'm aware of at least a couple of times when it's been before the court at kind of the early stages of the proceeding, and various judges have expressed their own lack of certainty as to whether those strips exist on the ground or not. So that is unresolved, I believe.
No, I've had the opportunity to sit down with previous counsel, Mr. Mensing, and as well as yourself and Mr. Mensing, and we have discussed many options in the past, and none of them actually have come to a point of total satisfaction on all accord. I think we were close at some times, but we didn't actually get to that end of the rainbow that all of us wanted. With that in mind, is there any way that we can look at the survey and certify it at the county level to ensure that it was all proper and prudent before we go into the lawsuit or litigation?
I remember being involved in these properties back in about 10 years ago, and at that time a couple of surveyors had sounded in, and as I recall with a 10-year-old memory, different surveyors reached different conclusions as to whether these strips existed. I am not sure whether the county surveyor has ever dug into that issue and reached an official position on behalf of the county. You know, one of the things that will be done at some point if this case goes forward, or if any of the other cases that have been filed and still are out there go forward, is that will have to be done.
So do you think it would be prudent on the county's part to look into this deeper to ensure that survey is valid, or at least the best case is information that we have available?
Well, I see Chris coming up, who may have more knowledge than I do on whether or not the county surveyor has in fact undertaken this in the past.
Well, we probably got that question answered now, Counsel. Thank you.
Chris Morrow, Public Works Director. The county surveyor has looked at the original survey was given to us by Carter and Associates. Our survey team has looked at it. They feel that it's valid. I don't want to say that he's certified it because it was actually done, certified, signed, and sealed by another surveyor. But he's looked at it, he's reviewed it, and leading up to the 2008 resolution done by the board, in which the 60-foot strip was actually accepted by the county, our county surveyor reviewed it at that time and felt that it was valid. But that doesn't mean that he certified the results of another surveyor. It just says that he looks at it, he agrees with the intent of that land, which back in, by virtue of the 1889 map, showed that it was intended to, as an easement or a right-of-way, to be turned over for public use. So I know it's kind of confusing, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that the county surveyor actually certified that particular 1888 or 1889 survey. That was prepared by another surveyor who signed and sealed it.
Is the county survey certifiable?
Again, the county did not do that original survey.
Okay.
We reviewed it, and leading up to the resolution in 2008, where the board accepted that 60-foot strip, the county surveyor agreed that it was valid at that point in time.
And not to be exacting, but did the survey get reviewed, or was there a line shot and it was also
No, we
concurred?
did not go out, county surveyor did not go out and re-survey that original one. We simply reviewed the paperwork that we had in front of us at that time and felt that it was valid in 2008. And that's why the resolution was brought forward for the board.
Would it not be in our best interest, counsel, to have a county survey to go forward in the spirit of the litigation?
Well, I'm not sure, number one, litigation is going to be filed.
Okay.
Mr. Menzing is in bankruptcy, and his ability to file litigation on his own is limited. If he files it, I'm not sure it'll survive a motion to dismiss. I'm not sure it'll go anywhere. So I think there's a lot of unresolved matters that perhaps need to be resolved before we undertake the efforts that you're talking about. I was unaware of the efforts that the county surveyor had done prior to 2008. And frankly, based on what was done, it sounds like they acted reasonably at that point. You know, to undertake a new, separate, independent survey, we may do that at a time in the future if necessary. But I believe, based on where we are today, we have undertaken adequate actions.
So our actions are defensible. And that's all I was looking at. It wasn't a question of doubt. It was a question in the spirit of fairness for the citizen as well as the stance for the county.
And I'd like to add that evidently the surveyor who did do the survey, Carter Associates, probably has better long-term records in their files than does the county. The father of Mr. Carter, who's not a young man anymore, I mean the son, did a lot of the original surveying of this county, and again, I think his records are probably among the best in the county. So again, I think we're traipsing a little bit more into the substance of the issue.
Correct.
Which I think we ought to avoid at this time, and I think we ought to ask Mr. Menzing if he has anything else he wishes to discuss.
Well, I will point out that in April of 96, that would be 1996, sometime immediately after that, Louis Simone had acquired a quitclaim deed from me to the western 990 feet of this right-of-way, which is covered in your resolution 2008-043. He was required to furnish to the county, prior to getting a land clearing permit for that strip of property, a certification which was done by a surveyor by the name of Hugh Smith. Likewise, Oreo, which was a company held by a bank which you bought the conservation land from, had Rod Reed, Moore, Mastel or something, and Reed surveyors, has furnished the county with surveys showing that the strips exist. But there's a question what they exist for. Under the rules of surveying, if they were 44 feet wide, they might be a road. And there was a question of dedication. The rules of dedication are clear. It had to be offered by Mr. A.A. Barry, and that would have had to have been done in the 1880s and 90s, and it would have had to have been accepted by Brevard County to be valid. And you have defied this. You've defied my constitutional rights. Your office prepared on the 21st of November 2003, and Mr. Plakowitz was a party to it, a deed in which my wife, myself, and my stepson released all interest in a part of the piece that you took, 660 feet as I recall. You didn't touch the rest of it. You acknowledged that there was an ownership at that time. Mr. Plakowitz wishes to deny that to me. I'm sorry. The only way we're going to obviously resolve this is to get it into the court system. I do consider it a constitutional and a civil rights and an economic discrimination action. That is where we will go, since you do not want to have Mr. Zudo or Mr. Brawl sit down and see if we can hash this thing out to a resolution quickly in the next week or two. It's your choice. You want to go to court? You, Mr. Solari, took an offering. Wesley spent an hour and a half with me and Mr. Collins, and you didn't even let it come before the floor. And for that, I will never forgive you. Mr. O'Brien sits there. I've never discussed this with him. What he does is just what he hears on the floor. He's never had privy Two commissioners, and I will not talk to Mr. Wheeler and repays the $20,000+ back to the sheriff's department he took to enhance his pension. If you have any questions, tell me, otherwise I will leave. And I will point out that you had the sheriff check me out. I'm not going to shoot any of you. I want your money. Any comments?
Thank you for coming this morning, Mr. Mensing.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is a request to speak from Dr. Stephen J. Faraday, Sr. regarding a proposed ballot resolution. Good morning, Dr. Faraday.
Good morning. Dr. Stephen Faraday, 2120 Captain's Walk, Vero Beach, Florida. Come before you today to speak with regard to the three 1987 30-year agreements the county entered into with regard to the city for water, sewer, and electric. Those agreements are expiring in 2017, may require 5-year advance notice in the spring of 2012. I want to point out that the electric territorial agreement was approved in 1981 by the Public Service Commission between Florida Power and Light and the city of Vero Beach. In discussions that Glenn Herron and I have had with the State Public Service Commission over the past year and a half regarding the complaint we filed against the city relating to the electric utility territory, that 1981 agreement with the Public Service Commission contains quite a number of interesting statements. One, it states there's no compelling reason for a Public Service Commission hearing as there is limited customer objection. Two, to ensure all persons are heard, a Public Service Commission notice of intent to approve was issued, which will require public comment. Public Service Commission also noted the attempts by the Public Service Commission and by the City of Vero Beach to contact affected customers to determine their views with regard to the affected territory. There are also Public Service Commission statutes, 25-6.0440, etc., that relate to territorial agreements and require the input by the public as to the views of the public on the change in territory. So I'm suggesting to the County Board at this time, in view of the fact that we're coming up with elections November 1st, 2011, that there are three alternatives to consider in relation to trying to obtain this information from the customers. Obviously, the city is not going to do it, because that would possibly show the customers outside the city do not want to stay with the city. The first would be to add a ballot initiative, to ask the question for those county customers who've got electric service and for those who've got water service both with the city. Do you want to stay with the city or switch to FPL in the case of electricity, or to the county in the case of water and sewer? The issue with regard to doing it by the ballot is that in the 2008 Stan Mayfield legislation that passed, the supervisor of elections obtained a legal opinion which stated that the supervisor of elections could not obtain ballots from non-registered voters. That would mean that those customers which are businesses, or those customers where we have snowbirds or people residing or who are from other countries, could not vote. So therefore it would be a very limited vote for the customers in the county. In addition, some of the addresses that could be matched would be a business they couldn't vote. In the case of our household, it's one customer address, but both my wife and myself could vote. Two alternatives exist. The first is to do a survey, independent survey by the county of the county's customers of city electric and of city water and sewer to determine those that favor the move away from the city or those that don't. That would give you the statistics that the Public Service Commission is probably going to need in the next year. Secondly, the alternative is to do a bill stuffer in the city's billing system. There's an item that is before the city today to modify their information technology system to provide for enhanced capabilities for downloading reports that would identify the customers in the various jurisdictions for water, sewer, and electric. That may be an alternative means where you could use a stuffer. It might be the cheapest way, and then have that stuffer mailed as a ballot to a county location. That would give the people who are customers but cannot vote the opportunity to express their views. But I think it's very critical that this now be considered and planned for so that you can obtain this information prior to coming to the spring of 2012 when you might have to make a decision to ask for or not to ask for the extension of those franchise agreements. Thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis?
Dr. Faraday, is this really the simplest way of getting accomplished the electric issue from the county side? I mean, I know there's probably an easier way on the city side, although it's complex. It's probably easier to do. Is this really the options that we're left with as far as making decisions from outside the city limits?
I mean, with regard to the Public Service Commission? Or just to obtain information?
No, with trying to make it so that we get the residents that are outside the city limits that are on city electric cheaper rates.
There are a number of different methods. One is the complaint that Glenn Herron and I have got against the city, which is before the Public Service Commission. We put that in abeyance about a year ago to allow time for the city and FPL to proceed. If FPL makes an offer to the city and the city accepts that, that takes care of the issue, because then they will have to go before the Public Service Commission. They will have to provide the information. They will have to do that. But if FPL is stating it may not have an offer until July, that's getting close to the elections. That's also getting closer to the period in which the county has to make the decision in the spring of 2012.
Why wouldn't we run parallel tracks then? And I can understand what you're doing with this, but is there any logic to reinstating your case before the PSC?
Yes, because then it would provide them with the opportunity for investigating it.
And would that not be a little bit easier than what you've put in front of us? And because there's a lot of moving parts about how to get this information so we can get somebody's opinion.
Right.
And I don't really think that I don't mean it in a bad way, but if you ask somebody whether they'd like to have lower rates, I think they're going to say yes. And so it seems to me the easiest way of getting this done may be to reinstate your case before the PSC. And if I could gather perhaps a little bit more information about it, I may be interested in, as a commissioner, seeing if the commission would be interested in joining you in your case. I don't know enough about that to commit to that today. But that may be a lot easier than what we have here in front of us.
That's a definite possibility. If the commission would be agreeable to that, that would be fantastic. Because I think what is very important is for the Public Service Commission to know the views of the government. You have a dichotomy between the franchise agreements, which were issued by the county for 30 years, and the PSC territorial agreements, which are also issued. There's no time limit on those. That agreement is 30 years old. It was done at a time when the customers outside the city were approximately 10% of the customer base. Now it's 61%. There are statements in the agreement that state that the territory is being aligned based upon natural boundaries and development that has occurred at that point in time. Now, on both the shores and in the county, we have situations where on either side of the street, one side is the City of Vero Beach Electric, the other side is FPL. So there has to be a way of the Public Service Commission beginning to look at those types of agreements that have been in existence for a period of time. It is hoped that if the Public Service Commission complaint is reactivated, in other words, abeyance taken away, that will be one of the areas in which it will look at. It's very important that the county express its views of what it wants to do for its customers. Glenn Herron and I have shown over the past 2 to 3 years the loss of money to the community for this particular effort. If the county could support us or independently go to the Public Service Commission with a letter and indicate your support for moving the customers to FPL, that would also give FPL a high degree of assurance that it would have the backing of the county in making an offer to the city for either all or part of the city's electric system. It could say, we just want to take the area outside. There are specific Public Service Commission statutes which allow the city to retract just to its boundaries, which is fine for the county and shores people. May not necessarily be the best economic or financial deal for the city customers.
If I may, Commissioner Davis, it seems like to me that the wisest thing might be to ask our county attorney to take a look at both tracks to get an idea of what the cost of a ballot initiative might be, the process of it, any comments he has about the pros or cons on it, but also to get with Mr. Faraday and discuss the PSC case. it seems to me that it's probably time for the county to weigh in one way or the other, and I have a feeling that I know which way the citizens want us to go. I mean, I will say I'm not quite sure of what the need for a ballot. I've been down to the South County with Mr. Faraday a number of times at the South Beach Property Owners Association, which is an umbrella organization which represents most of the people there. There are two things that the South Beach property owners don't want: a sidewalk on the east side of A1A and city sewer and water
Utility
and electric.
services. And
they've been extremely clear with that. So if it's okay with, if it's the will of this
Absolutely.
commission, I'd like to have us direct our counselor to look into these issues and to get with Mr. Faraday. But before we do that, Commissioner Wheeler wants to...
Yeah, I have a few questions, I guess. I'm not sure that it's clear in my mind why we even need a straw ballot. And if we're going to do a straw ballot, instead, I like the idea of doing a stuffer, even if we got together with the city and did a stuffer, which would be the least expensive way to do it. And no matter how you do it, whether it's an official ballot from the supervisor of elections or whether you do it through a stuffer or through a telephone solicitation, no matter what it is, it's a straw ballot. So we should spend as little money as possible to get the results, because the results are going to be interpreted by a board, and they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway. If I were on the city council, I would be interested in doing a questionnaire through and they have all the records for water, sewer, and the people that they serve, and electric, to find out really what do the people want, and the citizens, whether they're in or out of the city. So I'm not clear. I guess the question would be is, what advantage do you see of having a straw ballot, which I believe, as the rest of the commission does, would be overwhelmingly in favor of not having probably city electric and so on and so forth?
There's no incentive for the city to precipitate such a questionnaire process, because if it did, just as you stated, it's probably going to be overwhelming. So that's self-defeating for the city to even try to propose that.
But we can still engage the city and ask.
Yeah, but if the city is interested in serving their citizens and doing what they are supposed to do as representatives to the government rather than protectors of the government, I would think that you would have council members on there that would be objective enough to say, I want to know what my constituents think, and I want to try and service them the best way we can, as long as it works.
There's two different views that are taken of the constituents. One is those city voters, and the second group are the ratepayers, and they're two separate groups. And 61% of the ratepayers are outside the city and don't vote for the city council.
But by the same token, and I've never seen it rebutted, so I accept it as fact, that the presentation that Mr. Herron has given here and to me privately, if I were a city ratepayer and a city taxpayer and a city voter, I see, based on the information presented to me that has never been rebutted by the city, as being an advantage to move on with this thing. So it bewilders me as to why the city wants to hang on to it. I mean, there's all kinds of speculation out there, but at any rate, if we did a straw ballot, my point is what weight do you think a straw ballot would carry with the ratepayers, even with the Public Service Commission or anybody else? I mean, it's a straw ballot.
I think it would be very strong with regard to the Public Service Commission, because in the 1981 agreement, they were firmly involved in what was the view of the people. In addition, for their statutes that relate to the establishment of territories as well as handling territorial disputes, both of those statutes clearly focus on what is the view of the people that are affected.
Well, if this commission, and I have no problem, I'd like to know what, we're pretty open here, and I'm pretty open, so I like to know what my constituents think, the people I represent, whether they agree with me or I agree with them. I like to know. I would suggest that what we do is one of two things: have our staff contact the city, or have another joint meeting with the city of Vero Beach and say, what if we get together and do this straw ballot if you're interested in representing your public and not representing or protecting your government structure. And even if there's a cost to it, we share the cost, but do the straw ballot through the customer base that they have and they mail bills to every month.
I'd be
See if we
willing to
can
cover
jointly
61% of that.
See if we jointly can come together and work this out and start looking at what's good for the citizenry.
I'd also like to point out that the city does, the agreement between the city and the county with regard to water and sewer does not have to be approved by the Public Service Commission.
Right.
However,
Right.
when you get into the area of the sale or exchange of portions of a water and sewer system, that it probably will require a Public Service Commission, and there probably will be the questions arising with regard to water and sewer of do those people want to switch or do they object?
Well, I would.
First, Commissioner O'Brien,
I wasn't quite through yet.
after you're finished.
Thank you.
Get the over.
Well, I have some questions I'd like, but you know, it's the same. And are we talking, if you're doing a straw ballot at this point, are you talking strictly electric? Or are you talking electric, water, and sewer?
Electric as one, and water and sewer as the second.
Okay.
And I suggest we take these one at a time.
I would agree with that. Thank you.
I may be wrong, but I don't think there is a county-wide ballot in 2011.
There isn't.
I know the cities have some, but we don't have a county-wide.
Okay.
So I think the cost to have a separate ballot and open up a lot of those county precincts
Okay.
would be pretty high. So I think the stuffer probably would be the best thing. I think it'd be worthwhile because the big gorilla here is the PSC, and their service territory agreement far outweighs our franchise
Right.
agreement. And when you look at some of the wordage from the old agreement where it says there appears to be limited customer objection, I think we need facts. We need numbers to show that, yes, there is customer objection now. And there's wording about avoidance of uneconomic duplication. Well, I think we can show that with Mr. Herron's model. But I think, going before the PSC, the FMPA and the Orlando utilities, they're going to come in with some heavy lobbyists, and they're going to put a lot of pressure on the PSC to keep the status quo to protect their interests.
That's correct.
And if we don't have data, I mean, you can't go up there and say, well, we all got a lot of phone calls, people don't want it. I think we need to have some facts and figures to document our case that there is public objection, there is economic duplication, and give reason for the PSC to change that service territory. So I think we should definitely move forward, at least on the electric issue. I don't know how much PSC would get involved in the water sewer. I think that's probably more something we can handle locally. But I certainly think for the electric issue we should do some type of straw ballot and get some numbers to support our case.
I would suggest you also do it with regard to water and sewer, because there is a provision that the expiration of a 30-year franchise agreement, a municipality, town, village can reach outside 5 miles into an unincorporated area and still retain the same area. So unless there's a view of those people that would be affected, and 95% of the county's customers who have city services are in the South Beach area. And that is clearly within 5 miles between the city limits to the county border.
And if we're going to do a stuffer, it's not going to cost any more to put a second question on there than one question. So
Absolutely. Commissioner Davis?
Commissioners, we did try and get a cost on this to see what it would do to have a special election, but they were unable to give us a cost. But we know that in the past it's been between a number of $120,000 and over $200,000.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes. I'd just like to try to move this off center and not give him much of a runaround on this. I would. Do we have a motion on the floor?
No, I cannot make a motion. I
will move that we have the attorney look into what's been presented here as far as from the mailing or the stuffer side of it. Before we engage in any conversations with the City of Vero Beach, I'd like to have our legal counsel look at it first. And then secondly, come back with an opinion about the joining the PSC suit with Dr. Faraday.
Second.
Et al.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion? Commissioner Wheeler.
I like the motion, and I will support that. But also, somewheres here, and I think fairly quickly, this has been going on for 4 years.
Getting close to 4 years, yes.
Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of information that apparently from elected officials has fallen on deaf ears. In fact, I was late to get into this because I didn't want to interfere with the autonomy of the City of Vero Beach and the way they do business. But 61% of the customer base, the county residents that we represent. And I think if we don't move this thing off center, and I don't know where it's going, it's still a long haul no matter what they do. I would like to have another joint meeting with the City of Vero Beach and hang all the laundry out and let the public know exactly what's going on, where everybody stands, and look at all the facts. I would love to see the city's response to Mr. Herron's financial analysis that he's presented to each of us individually, I believe, and publicly here. And it's almost like, at least with the previous council to some degree, they weren't interested in responding and defending their position. And I find that a little confusing as to why you would want to defend your position. So, but I think, you know, we keep going back and forth. It keeps coming up. And I think just like with the minor league baseball, I think if all 10 of the elected officials representing the people involved get together in a room, we're going to come out of there with some solution, whether some of us like it or don't like it. But I think it's time that we open dialogue and start saying, you know, this is a problem that's going on for 4 years, and we need to start looking for serious solutions.
Well, on this one, I think the first step is to get the information we just discussed that's in Commissioner Davis's motion. And in that, I'd just like to make sure that when we go through it, that the information we get is segregated by city residents and county residents. It was unclear exactly what direction we were going, but I want to make sure that when we get whatever we get back, if we do go down a path to get something back, that it's clear what the county residents have said, and not a mixed pile of returns that include city and county residents.
And let's also distinguish the shores, too, because there's three jurisdictions. Yes.
Distinguish those inside the city
Yes.
from those outside the city. So I want to make sure that that's absolutely clear. So we do have a motion on the floor. It's Commissioner Davis's motion. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Is that 5-0? Dr. Faraday, thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you very much for your continued work. I will note that, at least on the sewer and water side, the dialogue is about to open. We got a letter from the City of Vero Beach asking for a presentation on the water portion of our utilities, which will take place on their February 15th meeting. And that'll probably be a presentation given by myself and Olson.
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment just real quick. Where are we? I thought where we left this was basically that we just needed to get permission from the City of Vero Beach to speak with Indian River Shores. And where are we in that whole process?
It probably would be best to let Mr. Olson give us an update on that at the next meeting. But a couple things are that the response we got back from the City of Vero Beach indicated that, yes, we could talk with the shores, but if we wanted to do something which would cause their franchise agreement to end early, then we would have to pay the City of Vero Beach something for that. The second, and in my mind possibly the more important issue, is that the GAI consultants agreement indicated that the city owns certain property and the shores own certain property, but that's not what we believe. And we pointed out some discrepancies, and Mr. Olson did, to Mr. Jefferson, the town manager of Indian River Shores, and my understanding is he basically agreed that there are discrepancies. We have asked for confirmation from the town of Indian River Shores for what they actually own so we can go ahead, but we haven't got that matter back. Mr. Olson is right now working on another letter to the shores to try to give more detail to that, and I believe that letter will go out in the next day or two.
So, along those lines, why wouldn't we send a letter to the shores stating what we own?
We don't own stuff in the shores.
Okay, so then why are we asking them what they own? Is it between the city and
what they own and what the city owns? Because we then have to negotiate with two different people, and depending upon which way we go, we might very well feel that it's not in the best interest of the county or the shores for us to buy their lines. I mean, it's worked out well with them owning them for the last 25 years.
Okay.
And if we don't buy their lines, then we won't have to embed those costs in any rates that we end up giving them. We could very easily have an agreement where we take care and maintain those lines that are inside the shore city limits for the duration of the agreement. And it's my belief at this point, and we'll get further financial justification of this, that would be probably in the best interest of the citizens of Indian River Shores and certainly result in the lowest water and sewer rates for the residents of the shores. So these are some of the reasons, but we'd be happy to ask Mr. Olson to give a more detailed report next week if you'd like.
Either that or after your meeting with the City of Vero Beach.
That'd be fine. After the meeting with the City of Beach,
That'd be better.
probably working on our portions of the report. And personally, though, I'm just very glad that after 2 years of trying, I finally got the invitation to appear before the city, and we can now actually begin a more open dialogue. Again, I mean, these things sometimes take time. This is the government. Some things take longer than others, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Ken, thank you very much for your support. I'd like to mention that the Shores agreements for water and sewer provide for reversion of the infrastructure from city ownership to Shores ownership at the termination of the agreement. So that's something that the GAI did not present. So that's a factor that comes into this also in terms of timing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Faraday. Next up is a notice of public items, and I'll let Mr. Plockwich read whatever he feels necessary.
Yes. There are two notices of scheduled public hearings on February 8, 2011. The first is the Points Development LLC's request for vacation of the Miramar subdivision plat, which is a legislative matter. And the second is the Points Development LLC's request for vacation of Fred R. Turk Drive Extension, which is also a legislative matter. Those are scheduled for next week, February 8th.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plockwich. Next up are departmental matters, community development, and a consideration of the extension of temporary suspension of impact fees. And we've got the top A-B team in the county today, Mr. Keating and Mr. Brown. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Bob Keating. I'm County Community Development Director. I'm going to start off. This item involves whether or not to extend the temporary suspension of 5 of the county's 9 impact fees. Just to go over a little history, the county first suspended 5 of the 9 county impact fees for economic development purposes just about almost 2 years ago. And the first suspension went from April of 2009 to the end of September 2009. After that, the board extended the suspension for another 6 months, which would have expired on March 31st, 2010. And then the board extended the suspension for a year. So right now, if no action is taken, the suspension of the impact fees will expire on March 31st. Now, the bad news is you can't take any action on this today. This is it requires a modification of the county's impact fee ordinance. Therefore, it requires advertising and a public hearing. So if you direct the county to go forward today, we'll advertise for a public hearing probably, I think, on March 15th. And at that time, you'll be able to take action. Also, we are not the only entity that has a say in this. We have interlocal agreements with all 5 of the municipalities. The interlocal agreements provide that we will give the municipalities a 30-day notice before we make any changes to the impact fee ordinance, and we have already done that. We have sent them a copy of the staff report and said that this is the 30-day notice in case the board does opt to go forward and take action. So we have done that. In preparing this staff report, we did an analysis to see whether or not the impact fees have produced any changes in building permit activity. And there's a table on page 157 in your backup. And I want to make a couple of minor modifications to the numbers there. Unfortunately, we really can't use calendar years to make these comparisons because the first suspension started in April. So what I've done is take 3 10-month periods. Actually, the first suspension period, which was April 1, 2009 to January 31st, 2010. And then the second period, April 1, 2010 to January 31st, 2011, which was yesterday, which was after the staff report was written. So we've had a little more activity, and I just want to update you on that. In that table, under the April 1, 2010 to January 31st, 2011 row there, instead of 193 new single-family building permits, it's 197, and under commercial, instead of 25, it's 27. I do want to emphasize these are actual applications, and we ran a report from our system and got these numbers. So what it looks like is it's real close to what it was in the previous 10-month period, and as you can see, it's significantly below the 10-month control period before the suspension was put into place. And if I had gone back a few years before that, the numbers would have been significant back when we're at the peak of the boom. I also want to tell you that numbers sometimes don't tell the entire story. I drill down, particularly on the commercial permits, and it's not as good as it seems. Of these 27 permits, actually 8 of them were for bus shelters for the SRA. Actually, 2 others are from the Senior Resource Association, too. Their administration building and maintenance building that's being built with stimulus funds.
Bob, I got to ask you, did the bus shelters have to pay impact fees?
No. Actually, that's another thing. Most of the permits, or probably at least half the permits, were not subject to impact fees, the commercial ones, because the commercial permits include alterations, internal alterations, tenant build-outs, things like that don't have impact fees. Actually, 3 of the other permits were county permits, 2 from utilities and 1 from recreation for the South County Park. So unfortunately, when you drill down, the 27 number, which doesn't look too bad off the top, doesn't look too good when you look down even further. But overall, even though the impact fee suspension hasn't resulted in a significant increase in building permit activity or economic activity, there are some other reasons why it's beneficial to do this. It presents a good image. It indicates that the county is open for business, and staff recommends that you do go forward, that you direct staff to advertise for a public hearing, and that we go forward with the proposed suspension and do it for another year like we did last time.
So moved.
I was going to ask if Jason wanted to, well, we'll see if there's a second.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Fleischer. I would like to ask Jason if you had any plans to add anything. You needn't if you didn't have plans.
Not unless you have any questions.
Bob spent a lot of time telling us how bad it is out there.
Bob covered it well.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks.
Any discussion? I'll begin with Commissioner Fleischer.
No.
Davis? Commissioner Wheeler?
A couple of questions and some comments before we vote, obviously. Out of the almost 400 homes that were built in the last, 2 years, who were the primary pullers of those permits?
I did an analysis of the previous period. I didn't go back to both periods.
Okay.
So I did the April 1, 2010 to January 31st, 2011. And it is kind of interesting. If you take the top 4 companies that applied for building permits, they represent a little less than half the total amount. And the number 1 was Centex with 26 single-family building permit applications. That's in Woodfield. Number 2 was Pulte, which is the old Devasta, and they had 25 single-family building permit applications, and that's in Waterway Village. Number 3 was A. Barron, and that's Eli Barron, who is the successor builder and developer in Eagle Trace, and he actually had 15 permits, and one other, D.R. Horton, which is a national builder and new to this area, pulls 17 permits. Actually, up there in the top 6 or top 7 is Habitat. Habitat did 9 single-family building permit applications.
Are they national?
It's a national organization, but it's a local chapter.
Local effort.
Actually, Owner Builders pulled 9, and Centerline Homes, which is building in Vero Largo, did 11. And then most of the others, none of the others did a significant number.
Okay. My problem with this, and the reason I supported this originally, was to try and do something at the expense of allowing more single-family homes without paying impact fees, was to help commercial. My take on this is, one, the demands for services and more roads come from single-family homes and condominiums, etc., not commercial development. They come to support and service the individuals that move here. And then when I sit and look at it, we are giving breaks to the majority of these are national builders who, big business, multi-million and billion-dollar corporations. And to answer Wesley's thing, Habitat is national, but also Habitat gets a tremendous amount of money in their budget from the government and grants and other things. So, you know, that's kind of a wash with impact fees, plus their houses are very small. We're talking an insignificant part. The other thing that really concerns me is just the sense of fairness. We have a huge of single-family homes that are going into foreclosure and everything else because these national builders came in here and saturated the market, as they've done in other popular areas around the country, at the expense of the local economy, the local builders, local realtors, and everything else. And we're continuing to support big business with small pieces of local government subsidies, or not subsidies, but by allowing them to save money on what they need to, what they're building for single family. And I've always believed that single family impact fees or residential impact fees are far too low for the demand on services. And if we have the philosophy that we're going to build infrastructure with impact fees, that should be placed on the people that create that need, and that's the single-family home buyer, not so much the commercial. And there's got to be a line someplace between big box and, you know, local small commercial development. The one thing I like about commercial, at least it employs people, whether it's one person or 50 people or whatever. I'm not going to support this. I think it's wrong what we're doing. I think it's protectionism. It's not even protecting our local people and developers. It's primarily protecting multi-billion-dollar businesses that have done this across the country and have been a very significant part of where we are economically across the country, along with Fannie Mae and everything else. So I'm not going to support it for those reasons. I just disagree with it. We tried it, didn't work, no significant results or savings or boom in building or anything else. And it hurts the people that are trying to sell their homes that have paid their impact fees before we change the rules. And it puts the new people and big business at a disadvantage or an advantage over the local people that are trying to unload their homes. Increases more inventory.
Thank you, Commissioner Wheeler. Commissioner O'Brien.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur and agree with a lot of what Commissioner Wheeler said. And the staff backup for the current 10-month period resulted in about $200,000 of impact fees not collected. Well, that was just one 10-month period. If we apply that to the two 10-month periods, now we're at $400,000 between the 2 years. And, you know, the idea, I think, of stimulus is to have an immediate reaction, to have a stimulus. And I think if we continue to carry this on, it now becomes more of an entitlement than a stimulus. Mm-hmm. And further in our agenda, under emergency services, there's some projected capital costs, and the 5 impact fees were not collected are emergency services, law enforcement, correctional, public buildings, and solid waste. And I know in discussions with the sheriff, he has some office and storage and building needs that we should be collecting impact fees to go towards. With the emergency services district, we have 2 fire stations in the budget, plus potentially some renovations to 2 others. And I agree. I think a lot of these builders are coming in now. Whether we have the waiver or not, they're going to keep building these new homes. I think the market has flattened. We're seeing a lot of economic recovery signs out there in the national as well as local here. And I think at some point we need to get back to collecting those fees. And I think it does provide a balance with the existing inventory. You know, if you can build a house now cheaper than most of these other older homes are sitting there, and I think it is getting to be an unfair entitlement to subsidize them. So if we're going to do anything, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to keeping the suspension on correctional, public buildings, and solid waste. I don't see any immediate need to be collecting those, and I realize those are not very big item tickets. But at the very least, I think we should go back to collecting emergency services and law enforcement impact fees, because we do have a need for those, and we do need to keep that infrastructure to provide the level of service that the community expects. So if the motion is to suspend all 5 of the impact fees, I can't support that. I would support suspending the 3 correctional, public buildings, and solid waste for another year, but I think we need to start getting emergency services and law enforcement back.
Mr. Chairman. I'm pretty much going down the line, and I haven't had a chance to speak, so I will now. I'm going to be consistent with the position I've taken the 2 or 3 other times this has come before us. I believe that impact fees should be used to pay for development and not to be used to manage growth one way or the other. I mean, I think it's an improper use of this tool. I will wonder, though, or bring up the wonder of government. And one of the programs, which is probably Bob Keating's favorite program right now, is the National Stabilization Program. And there we're getting about $4.25 million from the federal government to stabilize neighborhoods where there are too many homes built. So on the one hand, let's stabilize these buildings where there are too many homes, but on the other hand, let's have some incentive to build more homes in these unstable neighborhoods. So I have a very hard time getting them to mesh. I'd love to have a discussion at another time with you, Bob, on this and then the wisdom of it, but you don't need to do it today.
And just to tell you, we're going to be coming to you next week to see if you want us to apply for the $1.5 million that HUD has allocated to us for Neighborhood Stabilization 3.
Oh, so there is to stabilize the neighborhoods that this motion would have us destabilize today. Ah, wonderful.
There is an opportunity for a discussion.
Government is great. Well, so it's clear. I'm going to just maintain my belief that impact fees should be used to pay for development and not used to manage growth in any way. Commissioner Davis.
And on the Phase 3, I guess it'd be the trilogy, so I'm looking forward to that one. Gentlemen, I really find it a little unfortunate, I think, that how you're focusing on the residential side of it. But I think with you pointing that out, that there's not a commissioner up here that truly wishes that we could lower the impact fees only on businesses. Everybody's in agreement with that. We tried that. And legal counsel, unless we want him to go back and look at it one more time, everybody's in agreement that the counsel was right at the time, our legal counsel was right at the time that said you cannot lower impact fees just on businesses. With that being said, Bob, if I'm not mistaken, the way we have this structured, the commercial impact fees are up to about a 35% reduction. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, commercial pays impact fees in only one category, and that's transportation. A residential is paying impact fees in 4 categories. That's transportation, libraries, schools, and recreation.
We suspended libraries, didn't we? Isn't that one that's suspended?
No, they are residential pays.
They're still paying
library.
that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And with that said, Bob, the school, the residential is still paying those impact fees. Say them one more time for me.
1 impact fee for commercial, just transportation, and 4 for residential, transportation, and then 3 impact fees that only people and not businesses create the demand. And those are schools, libraries, and recreation.
So to hear what was just said up here, in my opinion, would have made it sound like that basically we were waiving everything on an impact fee for a residential structure. Roads is not being affected. We are still collecting that. Schools are not being affected. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, my mind is telling me that the total impact fee reduction, the way we have it structured for residential, is only about a 10% reduction.
I think it's about 12%. Yeah, it's about, for a mid-range home, it's about $1,000 difference.
And so we have targeted this as best we possibly can towards businesses so that they will employ people during a recession. And to talk about the national builders getting a 10% reduction and making that appear to be that, I don't know, like we're subsidizing them to the tune of billions of dollars like the federal government has, to me is a stretch of the imagination, and I'm going to say an exaggeration as a matter of fact. I believe that what we have in place right now, I clearly, you can look at it and say, in fact, when the impact fees were higher back in 2009, well, we actually had more building. But to sit here and say that it hasn't worked, I know of a veterinarian personally up on 69th Street, Dr. Bill. She's hired veterinarians. They're in there doing business. They took advantage of the impact fee reduction for her commercial large animal hospital, and it worked.
Commissioner David, apocryphal stories like that are always useful to make a point. But I can answer by saying that when I take my walk, I pass 20 or 30 for rent signs on commercial properties all along the beach, which is a very highly desirable area. So we build 4 or 5 more buildings, and that'll be great for some temporary employment, but then we're putting the businesses of hundreds of commercial landlords at risk. So, you know, the one apocryphal story is good, but and somebody may benefit from that, and I'm happy for that person. But hundreds more can suffer for that. And for a lot of these landlords now, the difference between $15 a square foot and $13 a square foot, which may result from a little more inventory on the market, could be the difference between making their mortgage payments and not making their mortgage payments. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying that my apocryphal story is any stronger than yours, but we have them both. And without much better evidence than's presented to us today, and without a different underpinning for the purpose of impact fees, I don't believe we ought to go ahead with this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up on what you're talking about there. Being in the real estate business, you can buy cheaper than you can build. Impact fees is not playing a role in that right now. The people that are building are those that need a custom building. There was not a large animal veterinarian hospital that she could go and rent that does what you're talking about. Whenever you can buy cheaper than you can build, the people that are pulling the impact fees are the individuals that is going to be at the Costa de Este, I think, on, was it Thursday? A new company that's looking to come into town. Those are the ones that they are either going to, they may rent, but if there's nothing here that fits what they need, those are the ones that are going to build. Those are the ones that are going to be pulling impact fees. Those are the ones that are still paying traffic. And it's the commercial entities that, quite frankly, that we are trying to attract right now with the tax abatement. We've laid things out in front of the economic in front of the community right now for economic development. And believe me, this is just a small token of what I feel like we could be doing. You know where I am on this impact fee issue, and I appreciate your stance. You've been consistent. But to look at it and focus solely on a 10% reduction for rooftops, and to hold hostage a 35% reduction, or up to, for commercial, for only those individuals that don't have a facility that they can rent right here in Indian River County so that they want to go and build one. We just expanded the urban service area out there behind CVS just for this purpose. And that is this type of facility and structure that would get that just about that full 35% reduction.
When this first came up, I said that we ought to go back to the Duncan report because I agreed that the commercial impact fees were too high. And I do believe that another look at that impact fee structure and the legality of it may give us a different result now. So I'd be happy to support something like that in another motion.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But it's been my experience, and we're on the same page, every one of us. If they'd let me write the report, I could show how commercial actually saves traffic trips. I mean, we all agree upon that. The problem is the individuals that may be looking to relocate here, or companies that are wanting to actually build facilities, unfortunately, they don't have time to wait until Tyndall Oliver changes their mind.
I believe that another look by our staff may come up with something different.
I think you've got to back it up with a study. I don't think we can.
What I recommend is, your example of the German company that may move here is a good one, because we do have the job grant program, we do have the tax abatement program. If we still need to do something to get them here, this board always has the authority and capability to pay those impact fees if that's a deal breaker. And if we collect the $200,000 from residential, that puts money in the coffers to pay that impact fee. So I think we can still have economic development. I agree with Commissioner Slaughter, and Bob, you said most of these remodels don't pay impact fees because they're already an existing commercial building. They're just doing some interior changing it to fit their needs. And so I think we can still have the German company come, put together a package for them. If we need to pay their impact fees, fine. Let's do that on a case-by-case basis instead of letting a lot of money go out at this point. So,
Where are we getting that extra money from?
Commissioner, you can take that legally from the general fund. You're allowed to pay for, you could pay for a business because of economic reasons. You can't pay it out of the general fund. If you wanted to pay for a business's impact fees, it would be paid out of the general fund and go into the impact fee fund. Also, I'd like to point out that it is a delicate balance, and that's one way to solve it. I know that I was personally called by 5 commercial people with vacancies this week and saying, is there any businesses coming to town because we're vacant? We don't have any. So Commissioner Davis is right. It's a specialty type manufacturing that would come in. But you have the right in those cases to pay the impact fee from the general fund as an economic incentive, and that is another solution or thing you have in your toolbox if you would so wish to do that.
Well, I can tell I think I'm on the losing end of this, and so I'll go ahead and man up and take my beating. But I really do believe that to focus on a 10% reduction on residential at the expense of 35% reduction for a company moving in that would find something, quite frankly, that they can't buy in existence or that's currently here because it is cheaper, again, to buy right now in these economic times than it is to build. So a business is going to do that, gentlemen.
You've said that twice, so I'd like to give the different view of that. That's 10% of the cost versus 35% of the cost, but there are 50,000 residents that's out there. The downward pressure on the price is enhanced by building more homes. So it's not a 10%, 35%. It's 100,000 people who are impacted by this on the margin, but it's still 100,000 people versus a 10%, 35% cost. So that's the way I'm viewing it, which is a little different than the way you're viewing it now.
And the only thing on that 100,000 people, please understand that there is not a road that's being affected by it. There's not a school that's being affected by it. There's not a library that's being affected by it.
No, there are homes that are being foreclosed that are being affected by it, and that's what's being affected. And that's why the neighborhood stabilization program was put into effect by the federal government to help with that process. And this undermines that process. In a very small manner, I agree, but it still undermines it. It's a little eddy underneath working away at the benefit that the National Stabilization Program might have. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, I think, Wesley said the other approach was an exaggeration or misrepresentation. I think where Wesley's coming from also is that on the other side. I think that rationalization is great when you look at this and you want to accomplish something. But the bottom line is one, I'm philosophically opposed to this. I was philosophically opposed to it when I voted for it the first time around simply because...
Thank you, Mr. Gary.
He took it.
The other thing is I've never seen impact fees as a way to control or manage growth. It was a matter of having the money to build the infrastructure that was needed by the growth.
I agree.
And then lastly, somebody said the definition of a consultant is someone that borrows your watch to tell you what time it is. I happen to think if you want to hire a consultant to do traffic impact fees and to have a more favorable approach toward commercial development, you can preset the watch before you give it to the consultant to tell him what you're looking for. And I'll guarantee you, I don't think there's a consultant out here that can't figure out a way to accomplish or tell you what you want to hear when they start consulting and telling you where you're going. And I think that's where we need to go. Business is slow now. We're not building. And I would not be opposed to looking at impact fees again for the future because I've always believed that we charge way too much to the commercial people and not enough for the people that are coming in and buying residential homes.
Well,
and when I'm a resident, I've paid the impact fees. That's the other thing. I've paid impact fees on my house. If you're going to continue to give these breaks, and give me back my impact fees.
Now, during this quiet period, is probably the time to look at impact fees. So, Commissioner Fletcher.
Well, and thank you, and thank you for that little ditty, Commissioner Wheeler. I want to say that, Commissioner Davis said that he was taking on water, and I don't care not to take handle on the other end of the bilge pump, but it looks like we've taken on some water today. I think this action is premature. After all, this commission has done so much to put tools for economic growth, to support economic advancement into place. We've already taken back the buy local understanding. And I think that was errant, and I believe that it's premature to do this now. I believe that we need to continue on. We're seeing signs of growth. We've had some businesses come into the community. Yes, they looked at existing parcels, they looked at existing properties, but I think we might be closing the barn door before the horses have arrived. And I believe that this is far too early, and I think it's the wrong message to send. And I think after today's meeting, there'll be businesses that might have been considering coming forward and making Indian River County a place, a home, an opportunity for jobs and advancement and for commerce. They might be reconsidering, because everywhere else they're maintaining their low value and their welcome mat. And I think today we might be removing the welcome mat if we go ahead and close the barn door on this. And I might add that, maybe perhaps in 2 years from now, the same discussion may be brought up about another piece of legislation that was recently brought forward to defer taxation, as businesses wanted to come in here. For argument's sake, if there's not enough businesses that want to come into this town, do we then remove the tax abatement issue or put it up for referendum again? I mean, just because it has not worked to the fullest potential, we have not seen maximal value. We're beginning to see some value, and I believe that we should leave that welcome mat at the front threshold for a bit longer. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, and then I think I'll have said enough. And
well, you did that a while back.
I know.
One more shot at it.
In the process of this, and the comments that were made as far as this isn't a tool for growth, and that
it's not.
Philosophically, when you look at this, I don't see how, as elected officials, that we can separate a fee from a tax. And I think that the legislature has done that in a fairly successful way, I suppose. But here locally, the local individuals, they get it. They understand that a fee is a tax. It's just that simple. And when you're in a recession, I guess really the Keynesian theory of economics, I'm not one that really subscribes to that, I suppose. But I do believe in reducing taxes right now and during these economic times. And this is a fee that should be reduced so that we can have economic activity if it's going to occur right now. Thank you.
Hey, it's not a public hearing, but this has been such a stimulating conversation that I'd be errant in not asking if there's anybody from the public who likes to speak on this. It looks like we have one gentleman coming up. Your name and address for the record, please.
Brian Carmen, Executive Director, Indian River Neighborhood Association. I really enjoyed this discussion. I have learned so much, and I appreciate everyone being open and candid in this. Because as you go about your deliberations, to think about a couple of things or put questions in, that brought up. The late, great Everett Dirksen once said, a million here, a million there, first thing you're talking real money. Paraphrasing that here, is $200,000. Welcome that. It's not a bad idea. It sends a message. I think that's a decent message to send, and Commissioner Flesher is right in that. However, could I take that $200,000, if I could move the monies around, and I don't know if we can, take that $200,000 out, put a really nice welcome mat out in terms of advertising, in terms of attracting, that would work. I know we can't move it around, guys, but still it begs the question, are we spending the money correctly? The other piece of it is, like I paid an impact fee. I don't know what it was, but I paid the impact fee. And it's like a poker game. If you take Falcon Trace, for example, a guy buys a house for $300,000, pays an impact fee of whatever, I don't know what it is.
Rebuilding, not buying.
Pardon me?
If he built, not bought.
Building, I'm sorry. Okay. He built the house. Forgive me. He built the house in Falcon Trace, $300,000. And he pays an impact fee as part of that. Then comes along, another guy builds a house, exactly the same house, right across the street, and he pays less of an impact fee. It lowers the value of the first buyer. So every time you do this, you lower the value of the homes, which again is marginal. And I'm not saying that it's a big enough deal that you should just throw this out. But the things that you should consider as you do it. And I'm grateful to see that the commission, as I went through this last night over 1 or 2 glasses of wine thinking about this. You guys have all pinned down some of the issues there, and I would like to say that we would like you to continue the discussion in depth in that, to consider all of the things involved in this. And I met that veterinarian who does I forget her name.
Dr. Beal.
What?
Dr. Valerie Beal.
Yeah, yes.
East Coast.
Terrific opportunity, a great example of how this worked. However, how many more we replicated, and how many more can we replicate in that? So I'm very encouraged by the discussion, and I appreciate your taking the time to examine these things, and hopefully that on the formal public hearing on this, perhaps next week or whenever it is.
We're not having one,
It doesn't sound like we're going to get one if we don't get that third vote.
Well, if you don't bring it up, and you're right, Commissioner, forgive me. If it's not brought up, then there'd be no discussion on it. But in your thoughts and deliberations here, I appreciate your answering those questions to yourself.
Just real quick, if I could,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman. Bob, in that example of the $300,000 Falcon Trace home that went to a national builder versus somebody that had a national builder before we reduced impact fees, what is the spread on that $300,000 permit for with the 10% reduction that we have in place right now?
It's about $1,000.
And Mr. Corman, that's exactly.
I said it's marginal.
No, and you're right, but I just wanted to make that point.
Sure.
That really what I'm focused on here, and I know it's not politically popular to give a break to residential right now, and that's not the intent of what I'm trying to get accomplished. But what gets me is some of the examples are all about this national builder and $1,000 break on a residential structure for the permit. And to me, what we ought to be focused on is trying to capitalize on what we've put out at CVS, that neighborhood association. I believe that expansion of the urban service boundary, I don't know whether y'all formally supported it or not, but certainly there was no objection. But that warehouse facility, that more of the CVS's, that has 300 jobs out there and is the third highest, I believe, tax building in Indian River County to our ad valorem tax base. That is the kind of structure that would get 35% reduction if we were to keep this intact. And so the more we look at a $1,000 discount on a $300,000 building permit, the less we get away from, to me, the steak and potatoes of the argument. And I don't know. I wish I could convince my other colleagues to at least move this forward to debate for another public hearing.
Mr. Coleman, thank you for your kind words that we're looking forward to additional debate, and I do hope we get that third vote for additional debate and citizen input. I wanted to clarify something earlier. Mr. Keating had made mention about one of the builders, the home builders, that took advantage of the impact fees. What a great example. That was a subdivision that it's in the district that I serve, and it was grossly challenged. It was going downhill real quick, and people were bailing out, losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on their home, and it was in quite bad shape, was it not? That's not the message we have to give today. Mr. Ellie Ballin came into town, is now a resident of Indian River County, and now his children go to school in Indian River County, and he is part of the workforce, and all of the labor force that he has employed is here within Indian River County, and he's turned that subdivision around, and he's looking at a second subdivision. So I don't necessarily know if those ugly national developers that took advantage of this town pillaging our home fronts is actually the case. And I do believe that there is some merit and value to turning around a subdivision, because after all, what's inside of that subdivision is citizens, taxpayers, and an integral part of the workforce in this community. So I believe that the collateral damage, as we're portraying, is not actually the collateral damage that is actual. I believe it's all perceived. And I believe that we need to give it a chance. I believe that we need to give businesses the opportunity to come into this town and bring the jobs forward. And I am anxious to see the public debate and I would only hope that a third commissioner would jump on board to give the opportunity for the public to express their opinion on where we're going and what we're doing, and have that great public debate, because that's what our open government is about. And I truly, and I want to thank you for stepping up to the plate and coming up to the podium, and I wish that others had the same opportunity in a future meeting that I don't know if we're going to have.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
I swore I wasn't going to rebut again.
Well, I noticed that.
Then can I take mine back too after it's
Okay.
done?
All three of them.
All right, then never mind.
The bottom line is government, they sit there and you continue to think you can give breaks, give things away, make things free to somebody. Bottom line is when you do that, you don't get anything for free. Somebody else pays for it. And in this case, it's the local property owner that pays property taxes, mortgages, that are fighting this inventory thing. And what Brian said is absolutely correct. And who cares? Oh, it's only $1. It's only $500. It's only $1,000. It's only $2,000. We shouldn't be here playing with somebody else's property, and I don't care if it's $1, and that's what this creates. So the bottom line is the taxpayer that's here pays, and when you don't give something away for free, somebody pays for it when government says, hey, we're going to throw you this thing for free. Well, somebody else is going to pick the cost up. So anyway, and I'll try not to rebuttal again if Wesley will limit it to just 2 more instead.
Thank you, but Commissioner Davis, do we have another gentleman at the podium if we could?
Mr. Delisle, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
Danny Delisle, 696th Avenue. I have a question. We keep throwing away a $1,000 difference. Bob, what is the cost of an impact fee for a resident at 2,000 square foot house? 1,000 doesn't give the picture. It's 1,000, but it's about $17,000.
Pardon me?
How much does it cost for a residential impact fee, all included, on a couple thousand square foot house? We throw $300,000 as a house value. That's gone. Nope. It's hardly anybody can afford a $300,000 house in this area.
A $200,000 house without any of the suspended impact fees is $9,388.
But that doesn't cover all the fees that you got to pay.
No, that doesn't cover water and sewer.
Right. Doesn't cover water.
But I guess his question is, it's just the impact fees without the enterprise funds on it. When it was $9,000 and something, what is it now?
And that's for a 2,000 square foot house. It's $8,390.
That's 2,000 square foot or $200,000?
What are we doing, folks?
He meant a 2,000 square foot house.
Yes.
That'll balance the budget.
And
$9,000 in impact. You haven't pushed over a shovel load of dirt yet. You haven't moved the tree yet. You got to stroke $10,000 worth of checks. So the roofs or whatever. And I've talked to a couple. I have no dog in the fight, but Center State Bank's trying to open a new facility on a vacant piece of real estate here in town. $260,000 in impact fees for traffic. Where's the traffic coming from?
And that's a commercial structure.
RBC Bank or Wachovia. That's where the traffic's coming from. They're not adding trips to the roads. So it's impossible to do business here unless you're a national. You guys, not you guys personally, but we've created a tower. If you're not a national, you're not opening your door here. I can't open a door here anymore because I can't afford it. I live here. Have since 1978. I'm trying to put a 400-foot office trailer on a piece of real estate. I have got $8,000 in impact fees to put a temporary office trailer on a piece of real estate I own. Can't afford to do it.
Just
so 35% or whatever. I mean, I don't know where these numbers come from, but we can't afford to do business here.
Mr. Delisle, how many employees do you have now currently?
17.
17.
Down from 53 at the peak in 05.
What are they going to do if you can't do it?
Well, I'm just going to keep paying rent in a old building because we can't afford to expand. We can't afford to use our piece of real estate for what we bought it for.
And that's why we need to readdress commercial impact fees.
So perhaps the best thing at this time is
But you're not giving us an opportunity to speak about extending these. I mean, and honestly, it's minor. What you guys have offered is minor. It's almost funny that we have to debate it.
And that's a good point. You talk about the warehouse. Those have the largest. That's the 35% discount that I was talking about. Bob, what is the discount for a drive-through bank? What's the spread on a drive-through bank right now, percentage-wise?
Okay, a drive-through bank without the impact fees suspended would be $15,403 per 1,000 square feet, and with them suspended is $13,346.
And
That's icebreaker.
when you look at what we're trying to target is manufacturing, and the facilities that have the 35% discount is manufacturing. It's everything that we're trying to get accomplished. I'm ready for the question.
There being nobody else from the public looks like they want to speak, the question is called. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2. Davis and Flesher 4. O'Brien, Wheeler, and Solari against.
So it does not pass.
Does not pass.
Okay.
I would entertain a motion after all this discussion for something that might cause us to revisit the impact fees.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Davis.
Could I ask for a clarification of what Mr. O'Brien wanted added to the impact fee schedule?
You can ask for clarification. Yes, he didn't want to add it. I'll let Commissioner O'Brien.
What I said was I would support continuing the suspension of the impact fees for correctional facilities, for public buildings impact fee, and solid waste facilities impact fee. But I believe we should be collecting for emergency services and law enforcement.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis and a second from Commissioner Flesher. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Commissioner Wheeler.
You know, I could support that, and the reasons being, we got a new jail. Almost every public building we have is brand new, and I don't see an immediate need, probably for the next decade. Now, when you get into the landfill, that's a little different. But at least for corrections facilities, they're all new and we built for the future, and for government buildings, at least county government buildings, I don't see where we're going to be needing to build anything for a long time, because just about everything we've got is new, built within the last 5 or 6 years.
Correct.
And that was my point. Those are three
and I think
did not
those are
see
good points. Now, the landfill's a little different. So anyway, but I agree.
Hopefully, if Ineos takes
My
off,
argument.
we'll get rid of the landfill. So, but you know, we're short at least 2 fire stations now. The sheriff has said he has storage issues and office issues. So those are 2 areas I think we do have a need and should be collecting. So I'll support.
And I'll do that, and I'll welcome the support, because at least it's something.
Thank you.
But on the flip side of that, I believe the reason why we haven't built those fire stations right now is because we can't afford to staff them, and you cannot use impact fees for staffing them. Joe, do we have the money in the capital account right now to build these fire stations? In impact fees collected, or however we would build fire stations?
Well, we were using a lot of optional sales tax, and the commission's changed. It's not building a fire station that's a problem, it's manning it. I mean, it costs you $2.5 million probably to build one right now. It costs you $1.6 million to $1.8 million to man it. So it's not building it, it's a cost of manning. Can we afford to man it? That's the major issue.
How much would our budget, our emergency services district ad valorem tax be if we had those built right now and we're staffing both of them?
Well, the budget's $26 million, and if we had 2 more, that's it'd be up about another 15%.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly why it's not a revenue problem that's got us held back right now. It's a ad valorem problem. But I welcome you on the right side of this issue, and am ready for the question.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion passes 4-1.
It's just Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So nobody actually wants to make a motion to revisit the impact fees and do it the right way?
You know, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what that study's going to cost.
We can at least begin the process to see.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman. And I think we've done this before. I would like to go back and revisit this, and I just don't believe the numbers. I'm not a planner, but I don't believe the numbers. It's just like what was mentioned by other people, mentioned a dozen times. When you put in a drive-through bank at 27th and Oslo, you take traffic off the road, in my feeble way of thinking. It's the same thing when I mentioned at one meeting, I leave my house, I go by Publix, I go to Sam's, I go across the street to Home Depot, I go over to Lowe's, I stop at Burger King, and I go home. That's 6 or 7 trips.
You're getting all the money to spend.
They're paying for those trips. And I just think that the burden, and government has a tendency to lay the financial burden where they think they can get the most money with the least amount of opposition, and that's commercial and not residential.
No, that would be impact fees. That's taxing people that can't vote, that haven't even shown up yet.
That's right.
If that was a motion to begin an impact fee study, asking staff to come back to us with a report to put us on the path going forward, so we'd know how much it would cost, or an estimate of the cost, an estimate of the duration and things like that, then I'd be happy to second that motion.
That's the motion.
Seconded.
I would like to write the executive summary in the last paragraph of the study, if that's okay.
If that's and a suggested amendment to the motion, that's fine with me. We have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Solari. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen. At this point, we'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much. Yeah, Jason, we expect you to top that. Give Commissioner Pressure one more minute, and then we convene the meeting. I don't think that's the special meeting. We'll reconvene today's meeting of the Board of Indian River County Commissioners. Next up, we have a request for qualifications for pre-qualification of agent, broker, self-insurance funds, and direct writing insurers for property and casualty insurance. We have Mr. Brown, who looks like he's going to lead this discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Jason Brown, County Budget Director. I have with me today George Erickson of Cyber Consultants, if there are any questions for him. Basically, what we're here for is back in November, the board approved a two-step process in selecting insurance brokers and procuring our property casualty liability workers' comp insurance for the county. We are basically completed step one of two of this process. Basically, the process that the board approved back in November was we would have this two-step process where we did an RFQ to select a couple of qualified insurance brokers, and then we would assign those brokers to go out and get quotes from the insurance carriers out in the market. So basically what we've done is we've completed step 1 of 2. We issued the RFQ back in December. It was due, I think, December 30th. We had 5 respondents. One of those was disqualified for not having total the experience in excess of $150 million of insurance. The remaining 4, the selection committee ranked those 1 to 4. We shortlisted a group of 3 that made presentations to the committee. We have ranked those, and what we're recommending today is the top 2 of those, Arthur J. Gallagher Incorporated and Employers Mutual Incorporated, to take those 2, send them out in the markets to procure insurance quotes for the county for our May 1 renewal. That process will take about 6 weeks. They need to have about 6 weeks to go out in the markets and talk to all those various insurers and bring us back a program, at which point we will make a selection of those 2, bring that back to the board for a recommendation for approval.
Who was our last consultant that we used?
Cyver is the consultant that we're using for this. We have had Arthur Gallagher has been our broker.
No, Arthur Gallagher was the one that was consulting us when we were looking at medical facilities for county employees.
No, that's the health insurance side.
That was Gearing and Crown Consulting and the Gearing.
That's right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That was our prior health insurance.
Jason, if you could, why don't you just tell the audience how much we did spend on insurance last year so they have an idea of the scale and scope of this?
We spent about $1.9 million last year on our insurance, on these lines of insurance.
And the benefits of picking 2 as opposed to, say, 3 or 4 or 5?
Okay. What you have is writing insurance in the state of Florida for hurricanes and things like that is a very risky business. What we're trying to do here is have a competitive process, whereas we don't have just one broker as we have had in the past, but we have multiple brokers. We are recommending going with 2 right now. The concern is if you go with 3, 4, 5, you can dilute the market. There are only a certain number of carriers out there that will write insurance for an entity like us, that's our size, to give us coverage. We've got almost $300 million of insurable value. You've got, probably 15 insurers in the world that will write a policy for that. And if you look, the current program that we have in place, our current broker brought to us a program that required 7 of those just to put our package together. So we're currently using 7 of those 15 or 20 that are out there. So if you go out there to 3, 4, or 5, the concern is you dilute the market, and nobody can bring you back the optimum price because they can't assemble the right team. So you'll end up with 4 inferior, more expensive packages is the theory on that.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions of staff?
Just to follow up that, and the reason for that, Jason, is once one of these brokers gets a quote from an insurance carrier for like our buildings, they don't give that quote to anybody else. So the first guy gets kind of the best deal. And so as Jason said, if then you kind of dilute the pool of remaining carriers. So it's kind of a, one's maybe not enough, but 3 is too many because you get diluted. So you guys are recommending 2.
Right, and that's a good point, Commissioner O'Brien, and I should have mentioned that, is the way these carriers operate, they will only provide a quote to one broker. So if broker A comes to ABC Insurer and they say, I'd like a quote for Indian River County, they'll give them a quote. If broker B goes to them and says, I'd like a quote for Indian River County, they'll say, I already gave a quote to broker A. So that's just the way that it operates. So that's kind of how we went through this process, because before, you basically have the incumbent can go out there and lock up all of the insurers, say, look, don't give a quote to anybody else, just give all your quotes to us. So this process has provided some more open competition, and it's managed competition, and so that's our recommendation here today.
Any more questions of staff?
Move staff recommendation to seek insurance proposals from the 2 brokers, Arthur Gallagher and Employers Mutual.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien. We have a second from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got utility services. Direct purchase of materials for a 3 million gallon reuse storage tank and pumping facility and deductive change order.
Move staff recommendation.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much for being prepared, Mr. Olson. Next up is county attorney matters. We have a resolution of necessity for Laurel Homes parcel of property located on 66th Avenue south of 16th Street. And we have Mr. DeBrawl today. And before he begins, let me, if only we had another camera, would give notice to the fact that he is wearing a Packers tie and a Packers hat.
Thank you for recognizing the NFC champion Green Bay Packers.
As I said before, Commissioner Davis was speaking, even pigs find acorns. I'm happy for your Packers.
The good folks of Titletown would beg to differ with you on that. We're looking forward to a very good game on Sunday.
Wow, they do it once, and these delusions of grandeur go to their head. It's amazing. And I thought being chairman did something to my head. No.
No, it did. It did.
Your beloved Bears will be sitting back watching the game just like everyone else.
He's just one man. They have a whole team.
Well,
I mean, that's
that
unfair.
One. Well, let's get to the substance of the matter, Mr. DeBrawl.
Very well. Good morning, Commissioners. Bill DeBrawl, Deputy County Attorney. Have two matters here concerning the Laurel Homes parcel. That's a parcel of property located south of 16th Street on 66th Avenue. The first one that we need to consider is a resolution of necessity. A resolution of necessity is necessary to go forward in the eminent domain process. And if you take a look at the Laurel Homes parcel, you can see where it's located there, south of College Lane, 16th Avenue, or 16th Street, I beg your pardon, just north of the main relief canal. It's bordered on one side to the east by Indian River State College. On the west side, it's bordered by 1 and 2 acre parcels, as you can see there outlined in white. To the north, it is bordered by property that is zoned RM6, and the parcel itself just lies outside of the urban service boundary. It is zoned agricultural. It is also future land use designation as agricultural. Today what we need to do is go ahead and consider the necessity of taking this parcel. The Commission has already heard back on June 1st evaluating the scale report. That would be the different elements contained therein. You've approved that back in June. You then heard later on in July of the pond siting report. We not only need two main parcels of right-of-way on this parcel. We need parcel 16, which you can see there will serve as the right-of-way for the project. You will also see parcel 16A, that's the 0.81 acre pond site that's needed. Along with those two parcels, you'll need the accompanying temporary construction easement to facilitate the construction of the roadway. We do not need a public hearing in this regard. It just requires the board to review the safety, cost, alternative routes, long-range planning, and environmental aspects in relation to the proposed take. Those were all done, as I said, back in June. At this time, staff approval is to go ahead and approve the attached resolution of necessity, finding it is necessary to acquire the property using our power of eminent domain, authorize the county attorney's office and outside counsel, Policastro and LaRue, to go ahead and institute suit and pursue the matter to final judgment. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions of Mr. DeBrawl? There being none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Move staff recommendation.
Second. Motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioners. Next, we have the unconditional offer to purchase that same right-of-way that we just discussed. As you are familiar, in the eminent domain process, not only do we have to show the need, we also have to estimate of value before we go forward in the eminent domain process. The two parcels that you're looking at that consist of the Laurel Homes parcel. You'll see the triangular parcel to the east. That's a little better than 5 acres. Then there is the oddly rectangular parcel to the west. That makes up a little better than 15 acres for a total acreage there of 20.8 acres. As you can see, it is bounded just outside the urban service boundary. There is water and sewer running on 16th Street there with the expansion of 16th Street and the recent expansion of College Lane as well. In order to determine the good faith value, you need an appraisal. We have gone ahead and hired the Spivey Group, Glenn Spivey, the MAI, that has performed the appraisal for us in this matter. He took a look at several factors in trying to evaluate the highest and best use of the property. And that is the standard that is used as far as in determining the value of the property is the highest and best use when we go to court or if we have to go to court. He looked at several factors involved in this property. He looked at the neighboring property in coming up with his land value of about $80,000 per acre. His opinion was that the highest and best use of this property would be to go ahead and have it rezoned and a future land use designation, a comp plan amendment for RM6. And his reasons for doing that are, first of all, the proximity to Indian River State College. It directly borders it on the east side. Second, it would be the proximity to other similarly zoned properties. To the north, it's all zoned RM6. Thirdly, the availability of utilities. Even though service boundary, it does have water and sewer available to it. A fourth factor that he took a look at was the proximity to other commercial areas. And you know by past experience, you're a stone's throw away from commercial property, with the mall being just down the street at State Road 60 and 66th Avenue. The other thing he took a look at was proper buffering. If an upzoning would occur, would there be proper buffering to the surrounding areas? He concluded that there would be, simply because you've got the State College on the one side, you've got the main relief canal to the south that would supply adequate buffering there, and the neighboring property to the north is also zoned RM6. So it was those factors that he considered in deciding that the highest and best use would be RM6 for this parcel. He also took into consideration mitigating or negative factors that would negatively impact the value of the property. He considered that, yes, indeed, you would have to go through the land use amendment and the comp plan amendment, I should say. That would take time and it would take money. There is a risk associated with that, and he calculated that risk in arriving at his estimation of the $80,000 per acre for the land use, for the land value. He estimated from his comparables that RM6 property would land in the neighborhood of $160,000 to $130,000 per acre for property already entitled with that type of zoning. He then went ahead and deducted and arrived at the $80,000 per acre land value, assuming the costs, the time, and the risk involved in it. So if you take a look at the 4 parcels that are necessary to purchase this and expand the property, take a look at parcel 16. Parcel 16 is the 2.72 acre right-of-way that's there. The land value comes out to $217,600. There are no improvements or real improvements on the property aside from some cows and fences. But the severance cost is the other issue that I'd like to address. And the severance cost / cost to cure makes up the bulk of the damages at $443,700. If you take a look at the properties in the before and the after, in the before condition, you have an entire 20.8 acre parcel of property with the highest and best use being the RM6 multifamily up to 6 units per acre designation. A 20-acre site is pretty much ideal for something like that. Now when you take the road improvements and you split the property down the middle, along with the pond that's necessary there because of the property's proximity to the adjacent canals, you're left with 11 acres, a little better, and 11 acres on the west side and almost 6 acres on the east side. So you have the road running right through the property, not only diminishing the value of the property as a whole, but splitting it in half. You can see the other values associated with the pond parcel at $65,800 and the 2 temporary construction easements that are necessary to facilitate construction. The total cost for all 4 parcels comes to an estimated value of $742,100. And you can see there in the memo that the severance damages affects the per acre property in the neighborhood of $21,000. So staff's recommendation is to go ahead, approve making an unconditional offer to Laurel Homes in the amount of $742,100.
Any questions of Mr. Packer? Chair.
Just, the cost to cure, I think, is outrageous, but unfortunately, this is our appraiser, and this price basically is going to be the starting price. If we can't negotiate a settlement, they bring in their appraiser, could go even higher, which is just mind-boggling. And the only thing I can say is I hope we use this pricing when we come back and relook at traffic impact fees, and we use these values to determine how much it costs to put in a mile of road, because we'll have to get that back somehow through the traffic impact fees.
I will note, though, that the risk we're taking on the cost to cure, I think, this time is that the original property lent itself to about 120 units per acre, and I think that the smaller property is about 60 units per acre. And if you're talking about building an apartment unit for a college, near a college, which this one might be, you can make an argument that you can't build the type of property which would give the higher end rents because you can no longer afford the amenities for it. So I can unfortunately see some cost to cure, but I'm absolutely not qualified to say the amount, and in this case I'll have to take
Right, but if you go back and look at the big aerial, there is existing RM6 property just north of 16th Street that could be used. There's a lot of vacant land there that's all RM6. So my point is the timeline for if we would ever move the urban service when there's already all that vacant RM6 is probably 20, 30 years down the road.
Good point.
And we're not discounting that cash value back to present day. We're giving them that price on the assumption that, they could do this in 2 years, and I think that's an invalid premise. We have enough RM6 not only here, but within the entire county in the urban service area that the likelihood of a successful land change is very unlikely in the next couple of decades. And that's what we're paying for.
Any other comments?
Have we asked them what they'd take for the whole parcel?
I don't believe so, no. I think we've discussed in the past purchasing the triangular parcel of property on the east, but never the whole thing.
I don't know how much more it can go up for the entire piece. And even if it did, at least there'd be something surplus that we could use for a park or sell it or whatever's left over and go ahead and get a definitive resolution of this without dragging it out through the courts.
Well, I think now that the appraised value is at $80,000, that's going to be their starting point for the 20 acres. Mm-hmm. Our guy just gave them that. You're looking at $1.6 million for 20 acres.
Well, in our previous discussions with the owner, they wanted far in excess of the $80,000 an acre for the property.
Okay. Well, that's close enough then.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Yes, so moved.
A motion for staff recommendation from
Yes.
Commissioner Davis. A second from Chair will second it for discussion. Any discussion?
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, I just want to go on record as I'll support this because I think getting 66th Avenue is a critical part of our infrastructure and connectivity and alternate routes and all that. For the record, I'm opposed to the appraisal process that we're doing.
Let me get along those lines, if I could. I think because Peter, you've always have kept an eye on this, and you're right as far as the cost. And I almost wonder, whenever the state does this, they don't pay the dollars we do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, they do.
We don't want to go down the state road system.
Oh, you don't want to go down that
Right.
system.
Maybe it's because I'm not sitting here having to prove it for the state.
I'll give you a quick example. Not only in a state system would we have to pay relocation fees to anyone that we would displace, if we would pay a lesser amount at the beginning of acquisition and then pay a greater amount of land value at the end of acquisition, we'd have to go back and recompensate the first group of sellers for the difference between the first price that they accepted and the last price that we had to pay.
Okay. Well, in that case, and clearly this should be stacked against the government. I mean, we're taking somebody's private property, and I've heard some...
And feel good because it is stacked against the government.
Exactly. So with that, Commissioner, I agree with you. I mean, but the road must go on.
Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeBrawl, and good luck on, I take it it's going to be Sunday?
I think it's at 6:30. Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, so you're going to be worthless Monday. I see. Okay.
One way or the other, Bill's not going to be worth anything.
I'm hoping you're already planning on either sick or vacation day now.
Let's hope it's a vacation day.
Well, good luck. Moving to item C. Any other comments on the fragmenting demand, Mr. Plockwich?
No.
D, exchange of Dodgertown properties with City of Vero Beach. Is that going to be you, Mr. Plockwich?
Yes.
Please.
You will recall that back on January 11, we had a joint meeting with the City Council. At that point, certain terms were worked out, and eventually, I think both boards were in favor of the transaction, at least a majority, certainly of our board. And I was instructed then to carry the process to the next step. The next step now is a resolution approving the swap and approval of the exchange agreement and authorization to sign that exchange agreement. Let me put it that way. We have published notice in accordance with Florida Statutes 125.37. We do not technically need a public hearing, but certainly the board can entertain any public comment. But the transaction has not changed since what was approved on January. And at this point, I would recommend adoption of the resolution approving the transaction and the execution by the chairman of the exchange agreement. The one point that I would make is you will note that in the exchange agreement there are certain conditions to closing. One of those conditions is the finalization of transaction documents acceptable to both the City Council and this Board of County Commissioners. So my intent would be that once we sign this agreement, once we complete the title work and the environmental work on the site, assuming that all comes out satisfactory, we would come back to this board one final time with all of the final documents prepared for approval of closing at that time.
What's staff's recommendation?
We have a motion for staff recommendation from Commissioner Wheeler. Is there a second? I'll second it for discussion. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, at our joint meeting, I brought out several issues that I feel weren't resolved with the action we took. And I think if you make a little T-chart and compare this, under the county side, we're going to be putting in almost $3 million cash for new improvements. The city's putting in zero. We are giving up guaranteed parking for parking that has restrictions and can be revoked. The city is really gaining control over their parking. We're getting we're giving up a parcel that had frontage and good access for a back parcel with very limited access. And then finally, the 43rd Avenue, half of that is in the city of Vero Beach. Aviation Boulevard is entirely in the city of Vero Beach, so 3/4 of the stormwater needs is city boundaries, and yet 2/3 of the stormwater pond is going on to county land. And so when you do that T-chart, you see everything is on the county side, and the city is really not partnered in this project. And I would offer what I think would be a better solution is if the city just would have deeded the 10 acres we need for the clover leaf to the county as part of the sports village campus. That's an approximate $3 million worth of land they would be contributing, which just happens to balance the $3 million cash we're putting in. We keep our land for the parking, so that eliminates the parking issue. The land we keep still has access and frontage, so it eliminates that issue. And I would have proposed that we put 1/4 of the pond on the county land and 3/4 of the pond on the city property. And when you look at the T-chart from that point of view, you can see it'd be very fair and very balanced. However, this board voted to move forward with the proposed exchange, and I believe that once we've taken a vote, then we should move forward. And I will be a team player on this. I think it's important that we show unity and moving forward and supporting the Vero Beach Sports Village. I think this is critical to their business plan. I think it'll have a huge benefit for the community, for the economic impact it'll bring. I still don't like it. I still have concerns about our parking. I think, the best thing in my mind is if I'm wrong. I hope I'm completely wrong about the parking issue. Then that would be great. But I still have my concerns. But this board has voted. We set policy, and I'm willing to move forward and be supportive and show unity on this. But I just still have my concerns, but we'll move it forward.
Commissioner O'Brien, I have all your concerns and more, which I articulated in the past, but I took our vote at that joint meeting as this board's determination on that issue. I have no reason to try to use this as an opportunity to overturn it or reverse it. That's why I seconded the motion. And as I wrote to Mr. Callan shortly afterwards, we're all ball players now, and I believe it's the best thing for this community to go ahead with what we basically said we were going to do at that joint meeting. Any other comments?
Y'all know how I felt about it after it was over, as far as the deed restrictions.
The only thing I can say is I appreciate your summary.
Thank you.
As opposed to the last time. I think you did not. Commissioner Fletcher, any comments?
No. Ready for the question.
We'll take the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next up is an item under my matters, and that's the county attorney's employment agreement. As difficult as it is to imagine, Mr. Plakwich has already been here almost 1 year, and he basically is coming forward with the same contract with only one change. He is basically going to have the same pay unless we grant other county employees a cost of living adjustment. He's going to have the same benefits. He has the same, maybe terminated without any severance clause in the contract. The only change is, instead of waiting for his vacation pay to accrue, he can take his vacation for that year at any time. And if for some reason he's terminated after he takes a little bit of vacation prematurely, he promises to reimburse the county for that money.
Second.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Wheeler, a second from Commissioner O'Brien.
Discussion?
Same here. I'd like some comment.
Well, we'll go for Commissioner O'Brien first.
Okay. I think the 4.5 years I've been on this board, the decision to hire Alan Plakwich as our county attorney was probably one of the smartest things we've done. It's really funny with Alan, our role is kind of reversed. 5 years ago, I actually worked underneath Alan with the bank, and it's funny how things work out 5 years later down the road. But I think Alan has done just a fantastic job. I know that I get almost immediate responses from his office, either an answer or a commitment to look into it, and the answer comes the next day. I can't say, and it's probably me, but I don't necessarily agree with every legal opinion Mr. Plakwich has offered, but I certainly respect his dedication and his intellect and his ability to run that office and do great things. And I also commend him on this contract coming forward with the same terms. I think it's been a great benefit for the county, so I'm very pleased to have Mr. Plakwich as our attorney and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
And everything that Commissioner O'Brien just said. However, I'd like to take it just one step further. We had quite a bit of, I'm going to say, turmoil in our legal department, where we had we downsized, went through and we've changed some contracts around, and our deputy county attorney. Those were some difficult decisions to make, but I want to give Alan credit, not for just his work, that Commissioner O'Brien said, but the entire department. And the work product that comes out of there, the timeliness of that product is just it's been a breath of fresh air, and I want to compliment Alan on that, but also the entire staff. I really do believe that it's taken a tremendous step forward, and the amount of work, in my opinion, that's getting done now, even with more attorneys in the past, is to be commended. So congratulations on another year. And staff.
It's been said, but we'll throw a little bit more, Alan, if your ego hasn't been adjusted by now. I just want to thank you for your overwhelming response to every one of the issues, and you give a lot and ask for very little, and you're one of the few attorneys that make house calls too. No, but thank you for being so responsive and expeditious, so we can have orderly meetings and be well informed and well counseled, and your entire staff.
It's been said. Oh, Commissioner Wheeler.
I'd just like to, thank the Commission for their wisdom in selecting Alan. And one other thing and I agree with everything that's been said, but also what I found with Alan is that he not only does everything that's said, he stays ahead of the curve. I mean, he sees things coming we may not be aware of, and he notifies us, and legal things and potential things. And he stays ahead of the curve. But I've worked with Alan in the past on various things when I was sheriff, and I'll tell you, he's probably one of the best attorneys, certainly in this county, if not the state, particularly county attorney.
Well, it's been said, so I'll move on to item 15A1.
Thank you.
Can we vote?
We need to
I think
vote.
I need to resign at this point. I mean,
Well, you're ended a good note.
No severance.
Now is when you ask for a severance.
Is that saying you don't want to have a contract?
no, I would just add this. When the position became available, I looked at it and I thought it was an extremely interesting position and an extremely challenging position. And now, 1 year later, I can say it's been both of those and something more. But I think in that environment, everybody basically tries to do the best they can. You put forward what is your absolute best opinion on a topic. In this arena, some people will agree with it, some people will disagree with it. That's just the nature of the beast. So you win some, you lose some. But, today, tomorrow, the next day, you just put forward whatever your best shot is. So I think pretty much we're all working in the same direction in trying to do that. So I appreciate your comments. Clearly, probably 90% of what comes out of our office is done by the staff, including Bill, and I'm awfully lucky to have them. They do a great job. So we'll continue to do what we can. If you ever feel like you're not getting the service you should be getting out of that office, please let us know immediately, and we'll try to change that. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate working with the county. Thank you.
We have the motion for Commissioner Wheeler, second for Commissioner Bryan. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. 15A1, Emergency Services District, request for authorization to prepare and advertise requests for qualifications, notices for design build services.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second Commissioner Flesher. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.